Hello, I'm Juan Pedro Tomás. I'm editor with RCR Wireless News, and joining us today is Paul Scanlan, who is advisor to Huawei Technologies president and former CTO of Huawei Carrier Network Business Unit. So, Paul, thank you very much for joining us today in this session.
Juan, thank you very much for having me.
So, Paul, the main idea of this session is to talk about the current status of 5G deployment in some verticals such as seaports, airports, and mining, and how 5G is already enabling some efficiencies and a higher level of security in these verticals. Maybe we can start by saying that mobile operators have been deploying 5G networks over the last 4 years for consumers, and they have been successful in their efforts to monetize 5G. However, we can say that one of the main promises of 5G, which was enabling higher efficiencies and security for companies operating in different verticals, is far from being realized. Maybe, Paul, we can start by saying why is this happening and how this could be, and how this promise of 5G could be achieved.
Okay, thanks, Juan. You know, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, we were looking at the potential use cases of 5G. Remember, when we were developing the 3GPP standards, some of the key components we were looking at was the application of 5G to industries, and then how a telecom operator might take these to the market. And subsequently, we've also seen, as you quite rightly point out, and in this forum about private networks, that often it's easier to deploy a 5G or a private network, let's call it a private network, because it may include other things other than 5G. But the challenge that we see is when we ask back then what the expectation of, say, CEOs or CIOs or CTOs, or even the marketing directors, but generally the CIOs and the CTOs and CEOs of industries, yes, of manufacturers, mines, ports, for example, hospitals, universities. These, when we interviewed a lot of them, we interviewed about several hundred in Europe, some in Asia and over in Latin America. And it's very interesting that you asked the question about what are the challenges. Do they think a company's operating? Are they ready or are they aware? And the challenge was that, with the exception of, say, maybe manufacturing, most of the other sectors, most of the other people in those sectors, even their technology experts, didn't really understand what is this thing called 5G and how it could be applied, let alone a telecom operator who was building the networks, who had the license to be able to build a network for that. So we saw the adoption generally across the world, led largely by Asia, I'd have to say, Japan, Korea, and China, deploying 5G predominantly for consumers, yes, to replace mobile phones and move them up. And it wasn't really about speed. We keep talking about speed and latency and massive connections, but it was really a capacity model. You get a better experience. A telecom operator has a bigger, more efficient delivery mechanism for then video. Okay, so to industry players, we had two fundamental challenges. The first one, what can 5G really do for me? Do I really understand it? It's not about speed, latency, okay. And the telecom operator didn't really understand how to engage or how to, penetrate these industry verticals, okay. So when you say evangelization, absolutely. We've been doing these types of forums now for about 4 or 5 years. COVID created some problems. Maybe there was more opportunity during the COVID because we had a lot of online, so we didn't have to travel. We could do this discussion more often. But until you go and see it, or you see what 5G has done in different industry verticals, it's very hard to talk about it and prove to somebody why they should use it and what the benefit would be.
Okay, Paul, so what is your view regarding the level of adoption of this kind of 5G networks in this mainly in the seaport, airport, and mining verticals?
Yeah. I mean, when we did the analysis, as I say, 5 years ago, we also looked at how much money, what's the impact of 5G in each of the industry sectors, okay? And its contribution to GDP per industry sector, yeah? That's what we're doing. And we did it for most countries around the world. Very difficult to do the analysis, but, I hired some very good consultants to do this. And so beyond the efficiency component, which was really about 5G being cheaper than 4G from a capacity perspective, in the industry sectors, it depended which country, and it depended largely also on the culture of the country, the adoption of digital technologies, the sophistication and the adoption of of industries and companies within that country and within that industry. So it was quite complicated to do it. So different countries have different contributions 5G could make to the GDP by industry type. So when we talk about, say mining, we talk about ports and things like this. Let's take mines and ports, since they're the question you asked specifically.
Yeah.
In a mine, you'd say, and a port, you'd say, well, what does, Huawei, a telecom, vendor, what do we know about mining with ports? We don't know anything, quite frankly, right? And if you talk to the telecom operators, what do they know about putting 5G in a mine or a port? They don't even understand the business. And if you talk to the ports or the mines, they'll say, why do I need it? I'm using Wi-Fi, right? I have my own network already. What's the benefit and things like that? So there's an evangelization program with the customer, but there's also a business model. Okay, how do we make money? How does the telecom operator make money? How do we demonstrate the value? And for mining, it was really, I would say, necessity driven. What we had was the government saying, I've got people who have, unfortunately, accidents in the mining industry. It's a global problem. Mm-hmm. And the second one is, mines could be improved in efficiency. If you look at a port is sort of very similar. Okay, you've got all these containers and all this very heavy lifting stuff. It's a dangerous environment. So again, we have occupational health and safety as a problem. And of course, the more ships you can bring in, the faster you can move the containers, load them on the lorries and get them out. Obviously, you make more money. So both of these were efficiency and health issues. And what we initially had to do was we had to bring together the parties, and sometimes not just a vendor like Huawei or a telecom operator like, say, China Mobile as an example, China Ucom or China Telecom, but we had to bring together other parties who maybe made application software or some of the robots and things, to bring them all together, collaboration, to build it first with off-the-shelf products, industrialize them, show the benefit to the operator, show the benefit to the customer and to the other partners, so everybody can see that we can all make money and that we can improve efficiency and safety. And then we all went down a path of, well, how do we repackage those products to make them off the shelf so they could be deployed in scale? China has 5,000 mines, the world has another 50,000 mines. There's a big opportunity. And globally, you have 130 to 200 or even 500, if you take the top 500 to 1,000 ports in the world. They are good scaling things. So you have opportunities to take those things. And that's really how we started the program of investigation, pilots, prove the technical concept, prove the commercial concept, prove the value to the ecosystem. Yeah?
Great. I know you are involved in a number of mining projects in China, but you are also seeing traction from other countries in the mining field for this kind of implementations?
Yes, we see it both in mining and ports. And one of the reasons is, it's not to say that if China does it, the world will follow. It's not trying to say it that way at all. But, the scale on which China can do things then shows this industrialization of process and commercial and business model, right, and technical components. So you start to get this scale capability of knowledge and also product and how to take it to market. So you're able to go to countries like Thailand, countries in Latin America, other countries in Asia, and say countries in Africa. If we just look at mining operations, because that's a lot of mines there, then a lot of those countries have the same two challenges that we saw in China with health and safety and efficiency. So these countries could now see, how did China do it? Which vendors would be used? Which partners? What was the value of a telecom operator? Did a regulator need to come in, telecom regulator or an industry minister come and understand it in order to say, yes, this use case suits my country and it will be valuable? So we have seen it being adopted in those countries. For the ports, we've seen about 30 ports across the world outside China adopting the same models, from Thailand, even Germany, have been deploying these sorts of things, yes.
Great. So Paul, talking about the mining sector, could you please develop a bit further which specific use cases are already enabled by 5G in order to improve the security of mining workers, which is essential for mining operations?
Mm-hmm. If you think, I mentioned, the case of occupational health and safety. If you think about the challenge we have, traditionally mining has been done by people, yes? and it's a dangerous environment. So people say, if you can remove the people, there's no problem with injury to people. So that's about automation, one, right? And what does 5G do? Very specifically, you can, by reducing latency and providing connectivity, so that's what the 5G will do between the robots who are operating either an open cut mine or in a shaft-based mine, then you can have operators. So you could be sitting where you are now and you could be controlling the mine remotely from your office in Buenos Aires to a remote mine somewhere else in Argentina, for example. Or even within the mining operations, you can have a better environment for the worker. And that creates a couple of opportunities and fixes a few problems. Fixes the health issues. It improves efficiency because you have automated everything, but also you're able to attract a different type of person, yes? Instead of having a classic worker, a blue-collar worker going down to the mine, it's dirty, so you attract a different type of salary, remuneration, and danger package. Now you have almost an office environment, so you can attract a different type of people to come and work in the mining operations. And you can do the same sorts of things, as I mentioned, if you move across from that to a port or do anything like this, yes? So it was really about low latency and connectivity, high-speed connectivity, to allow automation of that equipment in a mine or in a port, and then remote control of that. Yeah.
Okay, great. So, Paul, so moving to the port sector, what are the main challenges associated with 5G deployments at ports, and what are the main benefits for port operators that decide to adopt this type of technology?
Mm-hmm. The port is similar and a little bit different to a mine. So in a port, for example, you see the big cranes, they're lifting the containers off the ship and they bring them down here. So traditionally, the crane operator is sitting at the top. Okay, so he's looking down on the operations and he's moving everything. And you can imagine a crane operator needs to operate in shifts. If a crane operator needs to take a break, a comfort break, for example, then you need another person to come in there. So you have a number of staff on rotation, yes? Mm-hmm. And therefore, that's a cost structure. If you now look at other technologies that were being deployed, like Wi-Fi, Wi-Fi has grown up as being a free technology, open air, a free spectrum. It's been historically subject to hacking and attacks and things like this, yes? Obviously, with Wi-Fi 6, 6E, etc., we have the capability to improve the performance and improve a lot of security aspects, but generally, that wasn't the consideration many years ago, right, when we started doing some of this. So we've come technologically a long way, and technology integrated with security, both cyber security, as well as physical safety and security for the people who are operating it. So the concept of automation is the same as in a mine. There are some other differences, though, because we're now able to do some scheduling. Okay, so for example, before you'd have somebody writing notes of the serial number of every container, yes, in a tally card. Now cameras are there, and the camera can take pictures of everything, so it knows precisely where the vehicle is that it's going to be loaded on, which vehicle is going to which truck, etc., which lorry to be loaded on, etc. So you have an AGV, automatic machine that's coming along here, so a robotic thing the crane can be put on there. So there's no people inside necessarily the port, just like in the mine. But you're taking stock of inventory, and you're able to, if you add a little bit of artificial intelligence, you're able to start to learn which ship, what's the stacking, packing order, and efficiently to move the trucks. And if you think about port, which includes seaport, airport, and transport, then if you're able to make a port very efficient and an airport very efficient for movement of goods, then you're starting to help improve the transport and logistics. And of course, that improvement improves air quality because of pollution. It improves transport because you're coordinating all the trucks, etc., rather than having trucks sitting there waiting with aircon turned on, waiting for their load to come on, etc. Same sort of thing at an airport. So there are a couple of similarities and differences to the port and the mine.
Great, Paul. Maybe you can talk a bit about a really large project that you have in China, which is the port of Tianjin. Maybe apart from that project, do you have similar projects in China and in other regions of the world? regarding, I mean, the concept of intelligent horizontal transport system that is already active in the port of Tianjin, right?
Yes. So the concepts that we started, we were always talking about smart cities before, yes, and everybody has a vision of what is a smart city. But if we just take one component of that, which is really the transportation, let's talk about transport and logistics, okay? So the transport is a big problem because it covers everything, as I just mentioned before, yes, from the port to the port to airport, as well as the traffic, the road corridor, the warehouses, etc. So when we first started this, I mentioned we try a mine, then we try a port, we try an airport, yes, and then we try a warehouse, and then we try to connect the streets, yes, with 5G base stations. So then we start to coordinate the movement of cargo between these different facilities. I think you can see that if we make a port very efficient, a seaport very efficient, and all the trucks are lined up at precisely the right time to pick up their cargo, and they drive 1 kilometre out of the port, and then they're stuck on the highway, all that efficiency doesn't really translate further down. Similarly, if all the trucks are coming in at one time to a warehouse and they have to offload at the same time, they're all going to be sitting there waiting in turn for their queue. So there's some logistical and coordination problems between these three types of infrastructures. And that means you also need to build a 5G network in the airport, in the port, in the warehouse. But you also now need to think about building the 5G network along the roadways, yes? And then you have to start thinking about how much of the roadway do I build it for? And you might say, well, this all sounds normal, but that's, the port is not where a telecom operator builds the network first. An airport is not the place they build it first. Along the roadways, they're not, okay? That's not where everybody's using a hand phone, right? It's different. So the deployment becomes different. So you need to test the business concept in each of those things. Then you need to test the business concept and the flow of this cargo between each of these types of infrastructure. And that's really where we're experimenting in different regions, different parts of China, yes, on this scale.
Great, Paul. So regarding the barriers for the implementation of 5G, private 5G networks at airports, seaports, or mining operations, are you seeing these barriers? And in case yes, do you think that these barriers are more related to a technology issue, or these barriers are more related to costs?
It's a combination. One, you see, let's start with a telecom operator. He's the first person to get the 5G license. So he starts to build it according to what the license conditions are. And the license conditions generally are build a network, cover 95% of the population in 3 years, and you pay $1 billion for the license, yes? But what we've just described, building a network in a port, is efficiency of the port and occupational health. How do I monetize that? Yeah? Same with a mine, same with an airport, same with a warehouse, same with a street. So if he has to build it that way, his deployment methodology and his priorities need to change, okay? He only has a limited capital budget. So that's one of the reasons why we talked about private networks, because that can be a capital project just for the port, or just for the airport, or just for the warehouse, yes? The street is very different. So if it's a private network, it becomes a capital project, probably. So you need a private network. I design it, I build it, I sell it to you for X amount of money, yes? But remember, one of the strengths that telecom operator has is this concept of 5-9 reliability, high security, cyber security. Telecom networks don't get hacked generally, whereas a lot of enterprises do. So a telecom operator has a particular value to an enterprise. So the concept of a public managed private network is also very sound. But again, it's priorities, right? Which do I build? Do I build a network for the people or build a network for these things, right? Enterprises can take a long time. So government understanding the value of 5G in industry transformation, which improves the economy and the societal value downstream, needs to think about how to allow the regulatory policy to encourage operators to invest and to encourage the dialogue and collaboration. And again, if you're going to build 5G networks along the roads, the classic example of a big cell tower is probably not ideal. You probably want to put them as we did in China. We started putting 5G base stations on all the lamp sites. So it's a combination. It's not just to say it's capital, CapEx problem. It's a combination, understanding regulatory, understanding the value proposition, getting different parties involved, who owns the lights, lampposts along the roads and things like this, to share in the infrastructure and the deployment cost, perhaps.
Great, Paul. So apart from these three verticals which we are discussing, in which other verticals are you seeing potential traction in terms of adoption of 5G networks?
Yeah. I think, the three biggest challenges we've been discussing over the last 4 or 5 years has always been, these couple of years during the COVID specifically, was healthcare, yes, and security, which we're not really addressing here, but environment, yes. So if we just take healthcare and environment, you can see that the transport sector that I mentioned, if we can improve transport logistics, that means all the traffic is optimized so that traffic comes down, everything is more efficient. That reduces carbon emissions, yes. So that's a direct benefit, maybe it's an indirect benefit of providing 5G in the transport and logistics sector. But during COVID, we also found that, we're trying to do, before we got PCR testing, we were relying on X-rays. And therefore, to read an X-ray was a specialist. You need a doctor and an expert to read the X-ray to identify this problem of whether a person had positive COVID or negative COVID. So we started applying AI, and AI needs data, it needs information. So we started building hospitals, and I think you heard the story in 2020 in April, where we built a couple of hospitals in 10 days, and that included 5G and then AI-based in a cloud environment within a few weeks. So that means within 4 weeks, we had a brand new hospital dedicated using very sophisticated technology, 5G, AI, and cloud. Subsequently, we deployed the same business, the same model, the same technology solution, and the same learning algorithms in 1,800 hospitals throughout China in 1 year. Yes, that same year we did, I think, 15,000 manufacturing facilities. Yes, I can't remember the number of mines and ports, but that subsequently has been adopted by other countries. So other countries are now starting to understand. An example would be Thailand. Yes, the government has a target for healthcare, attracting foreigners for healthcare. So it's the foreign healthcare tourists coming. And obviously, if you can provide technology enablers to provide either a business benefit directly to the hospital by getting more customers through, or you can provide more advanced methods for detection and quality of healthcare, detection of disease and problems, then of course you can also make more money. I mean, there's some monetization. So those two sectors, we also see opportunities, and we see that starting to become scaled across the world.
Great, Paul. I have a final question, which is why Huawei decided to put like a big focus on this kind of projects?
Mm-hmm. Okay, when we were deploying, before we started to deploy 5G, we had already done a lot of pilot and test networks in China, as I mentioned already, Korea and Japan, yes? So we could already see a lot of the business benefits in the consumer market, yes, for devices. And it was largely efficiency driven. So I commissioned a study in Europe to understand 5G for the European application specifically. And it was very clear, the results. If you have traffic growth, so in data, if consumers are using more traffic year on year, about 20-25%, then it was very clear that 5G was cheaper than 4G. Very clear business reason. Now, it takes some time for the operators to try it, deploy it, and then they realize, yes, I have a bigger capacity, I can sell more capacity, or I can have the same capacity for less energy. So it was an efficiency improvement that translated to operating improvements. Yeah, so it was very, very clear. So now when we come to industry applications, we've been talking also for 5 years about 5G in industry. And, we showed lovely pictures of it in manufacturing, in this industry, in aviation, in transport and all that, and we had numbers. But as I mentioned, the method to engage was very tough, yes? To go and talk, from building a tower and selling millions of SIM cards having to talk to every single enterprise to explain it, to understand their problem, to find a deployment model, monetization model, which partners do we have to use, and then take examples from country A and show country B and company C in country B how it was done. This is very, very difficult, yes? So what Huawei has been doing now, the world understands efficiency, the world understands deployment in mobile phones. We haven't, for mobile phones, we haven't done the deployments indoors enough. Manufacturing is indoor, mining is indoor, education is indoor, healthcare is indoor. Yes, all of these use cases in industry are where we have been building the networks. So Huawei feels, so it's not about our, we've jumped into this. We've been trying to evangelize, we've been trying to market and give the use cases. Now we have a lot more, I'll say, a lot clearer understanding of the deployment methodology that makes sense, financial sense, technical sense, yes? The better business reasons why it should be done, yes? Better understanding and better ecosystem across all the partners who need to be included in this. And we have enough, I'll say, references from different companies in different countries. And that's where Huawei is using our marketing, global marketing capability to demonstrate those to a broader audience. And that's really, I think, we've taken this opportunity to market, I'll say, for everybody across the whole world.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your time and for this insightful conversation. And thank you everyone for joining, and please stay and join our next session. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.